Welcome. I was thinking I'll be speaking German. Most of you are German, I think. Is that all right? So thank you for letting me speak today here. This is my favorite topic. I love talking about it, the microbiome. I suppose you heard Professor Lang's speech yesterday, so you've heard a lot about it, but I will still take you through what the microbiome is, what it means for us, the microbiome in and on us. It's hard to separate because it all plays together. But I will be talking about the skin microbiome specifically, and then, of course, the cosmetics market. A lot is happening, and I'll tell you what you specifically can say and what you shouldn't say, the do's and don'ts, how you can prove claims. And then I will speak about our certification that we developed for cosmetics products and their impact on the microbiome. So first of all, the human microbiome. So the cells are about 50-50, human and microbes. So the microbiome are bacteria and viruses and fungi that live on us and have a lot more than human cells. What I think is very interesting, however, is that the germs living on us actually give us 150 times more genes in addition to the genes that we ourselves have. This may help you get an idea of how important the microbiome is, because every gene that is added is like a tool for our body, which the body needs in order to function properly. So without our microbiome, we would not be able to live. What's also interesting is that we are actually pretty similar, genetically 99.9%, but the microbiome has a diversity of 80 to 90% between humans. So our microbiomes are hugely individual and susceptible to many influences. Now, regarding the functions, what do we need the microbiome for? First of all, it interacts strongly with our immune system. So on the one hand, the immune system is trained by the microbes to react properly in the right situations, but not to overreact, so not to develop any allergies against germs that are actually good for us. And it helps and supports the immune system if there's an emergency. For instance, if the immune system needs help in order to deflect pathogenic microbes or toxins, it helps the body in the intestines and on the skin. It's different germs, but doing the same job, basically. It helps us produce nutrients, vitamins, fatty acids, things we need for other bodily functions. It also helps in the intestines and on the skin. Helps to break down nutrients. So we can actually train that by our diet. Depending on what we eat, we can feed these or those germs, which are particularly good at breaking down fats, and others can handle cellular elements more. So depending on what we eat, we are basically breeding the germs that can break down the things we need broken down. So what influences our microbiome? It's very diverse. So first of all, there's our genetic makeup. We cannot change that. And when we imagine our body like an ecosystem or like a planet, we have the ecosystems on our body, and they are dictating the direction, and they can tell or say what the environment should be like and which germs are feeling particularly at home there. So that's the first point. And then many other factors play a role, like diet, lifestyle, very important, so your hygiene. But it starts at birth, really. Many cesarean section births lead to the child seeing the wrong germs at the moment of birth. So because it doesn't get those vaginal germs that it would require, so in the intestines and on the skin. Stress plays a role, of course. Exercise. If you sit a lot compared to getting exercise outside, this influences the microbiome. And of course, where do you live? Do you live in a big city? Do you live in the country? Do you keep pets at home? All this has an impact on your microbiome. Okay, just so you can imagine this, we have this everywhere where there's orifices and pores, we have a microbiome, so the whole body. Even the lungs, the respiratory system, sometimes it's better in English, the urogenital tract, the entire stomach, etc. It's all full of germs. And there are keywords that keep coming up. One is homeostasis, which means that the microbiome is balanced and everything should be fine. Or dysbiosis, which means that the microbiome is out of balance. These are just terms that are important when you talk about the microbiome. And we, in the industrialized world, have already lost a lot of its diversity. And through our lifestyle, we're very far removed from our natural lifestyle. I mean, we are part of nature, but we have distanced ourselves from nature a lot. The best thing for the microbiome would be to go back to living outside. And, you know, swim in the river or in the lake. But, of course, the environment in which we move should be healthy and not contaminated. It shouldn't be a toxic environment, which you then will take in. Diet plays a huge role. We eat very unhealthy with what the industry offers us. And our hygiene behavior is changing our microbiome as well, or leads to depletion. If you wash yourself, if you shower, wash yourself from head to foot using shower gel, the first layer is gone completely. It'll come back, don't worry. But the natural microbiome that we would have if we were to live in a natural environment is long gone. And then, of course, we have antibiotics and other medication which destroy the microbiome as well. So now let's talk about the human skin microbiome. I chose that picture because I think it's actually nice. You can imagine pretty well how the skin is covered in these microbes, like a carpet or like the colors in the pictures. We're completely covered in microbes. That's our skin microbiome. And this is our first defensive layer on our bodies. But we're doing everything to destroy that defensive layer. So, just a few words on the skin. Now, in contrast to what you read everywhere, we don't have 1.8 but 20 square meters of skin if you count all the wrinkles, glands, follicles, sweat glands, etc. And all these areas are colonized by microbes as well. And the skin is, of course, also a barrier against the environment, against UV. But also on our skin, there's many different ecosystems. The temperature varies from side to side, pH value, etc. So even on our own skin, we have different ecosystems. The skin is much more complex than, for instance, the intestines. And the skin microbiome, in numbers, we have 1 million of microbes per square centimeter on our skin. And the microbiome protects us. It protects us against the invasion of pathogenic germs. And just imagine ourselves covered and the sites are just colonized by the microbes which are good for us. And all space is occupied, but they're only good if they're balanced, if they're well balanced. But if they're missing, for instance, when we put disinfectant on our skin, the skin is naked in that moment and is susceptible to invasion by pathogenic germs, and they can then settle there. So disinfection, which is of course a huge topic at the moment, should be kept to a minimum. Better wash your hands. It's also antibacterial, but it's not as bad as disinfection. Now, as I was saying, the germs can interact with the immune system, and they themselves will form antibacterial agents which are called bacteriocins, so they can kill other germs. And if the microbiome of the skin is not intact, we will contract the typical diseases like acne, neurodermitis, psoriasis, dandruff, but also alopecia, hair loss, allergies, and asthma. So how can we improve or protect the skin microbiome? And it starts at birth, as I was saying. Natural birth plus mother's milk, which is full of probiotics and good sugars, which feed the right microbes. So the basic microbiome that's building up is built up right from the ground up. Then, of course, spend a lot of time outside, play outside in the mud, especially children. I know so many children who always wipe down their children and disinfect everything around them because they are scared of this mud and dirt. But the dirt is good. And we should at least once or twice go without washing our hands if we know nothing bad happened. So spending time outside, exercising, being out and about. Diet is hugely important, and I think people are rethinking their diets at the moment. They're really watching out, what do I eat, particularly highly industrialized and highly processed food is poison for our health. And the microbiome also plays a huge role. So you're either feeding the right or the wrong microbes, which then will lead to us getting certain diseases or conditions. Of course, this always happens together with the body. It's not the microbiome itself. It's always an interaction with the body. Now, the hygiene behavior and medication. With everything you do in your everyday life, you should always keep the microbiome in mind and remember that you have to take care of it and that it's important for you. Oh, I almost forgot about that. Dogs, it has been shown, dogs are very good for the diversity of the skin microbiome as opposed to cats. Cats are too clean. So cats are not so good for your microbiome. Okay, let me now talk about the cosmetics market. As we know, soap removes the skin barrier, has a high pH value, it destroys microbes, it can destroy the cell walls and the membranes of the microbes, which is why we're washing our hands. But we have to make sure you don't have to lather every inch of your skin with soap. So I personally would recommend only washing the hot spots and leave the rest be. So that's one thing you can do for your microbiome. And cosmetics, you always have to bear in mind that the broadly offered cosmetics have a lot of ingredients which can damage the microbiome, which are antibacterial. It's not just preservatives, which are, of course, there to make the product safe. But depending on how much is contained in the product and how strongly its effect is, it can have a strong effect on skin microbes. But we've tested a lot, so there are also preservatives which, when you use them wisely in low concentrations, they won't have such a strong effect on microbes. So it's not just preservatives, but in combination with all the other ingredients, such as ethereal oils, perfumes, alcohols, biological products, natural products are not always necessarily microbiome friendly because there's also antimicrobial substances in nature. No, the claim substantiation, how can we show the impact of the product on the microbiome? That is actually a very difficult task. Now, if we assume healthy skin, we're so different that it's very difficult. Well, there is no gold standard. We don't know what the ideal healthy microbiome looks like. We have an idea of it, but when we analyze healthy skin and we want to change something and we see a change, we don't know if it's good or bad. So many work with diversity. They say, okay, this is more diversity, so I see more microbes after application, but it's not always right. What's important is to keep the balance between the germs. So that's one thing. then of course the microbiome is subject to many influences, not just the product that you're applying, but also if you have respondents, you have to think, are they using sunscreen on a daily basis? We tested sunscreen, it can be very antibacterial. If it contains zinc oxide, it's very bad for the microbiome. Oh, well, the ethnicity, male, female, age, place where you live, everything plays a role in genetics anyway. So it is very difficult, if you see a change, to actually correlate this with the product. So when you design a clinical study, it should be either very specific, so aim it at a very specific parameter, or they need to be very broad and to be conducted with various people from various places in the world. For instance, if you want to market a product worldwide, it's not easy because the microbiome is so complex. And when we compare to that, the in vitro test that we developed for cosmetic products is easier because we take the microbes which are there on the skin, and 90–80%. So we disregard diversity, these 10–20% of diversity. So, in other words, diversity accounts for 10–20% on our skin. And we can take the skin, cultivate it in the lab, and incubate it together with the product and then see what happens. Does the product kill off those microbes? Does it actually accelerate the growth, which wouldn't be nice either, particularly if it's individual microbes, because we want to keep the balance. And so we were able to develop a test which is standardized in a controlled environment and which gives us relatively fast results where you can see the effect of a product in a rather short amount of time. So now we want to make sure that the products do not disturb the microbiome. We can talk about improvement later. This is a different topic, and I think Ms. Lang will say some more words about that. So right now there's a complete lack of regulation in the cosmetics market regarding the microbiome. Anyone can say anything. I've been listening, however. There have been a few warnings, but there's still a lot of products on the market which claim to do something for the microbiome without actually scientific substantiation and without any clinical evidence. So either they're taking out an active agent and they say, okay, the product is mild, now it's good for the microbiome. Or they will add pro or pre or postbiotics and say we're doing something good. So there's very few companies who actually use probiotics, which are live microorganisms, or who have scientifically valid data to back it all up. The FDA has also conducted a study that 90% of all products on the US market, in that case, which claim to use probiotics, are not probiotics at all, but postbiotics. So in order to improve a healthy microbiome, that is something science is not able to do right now, and the question is whether we'll ever be able to do that. It's different if the microbiome is disturbed from the beginning. When you know something's not right, you know in which direction you should tip the scales. And there are some projects that work, some products that work, but generally you can say with normal cosmetics, it should not damage the microbiome, it should respect the microbiome, and it should not change the microbiome. So if you have skin problems like eczema, you know, okay, a certain substance is the problem, you need to get rid of it, and that works. So this is one example. So we put the germs on agar plates and then add the product, and on the left you can see an example of the germs growing uncontrolled. And on the right, growth is minimized by the product. So this is an example of what it could look like. So now, ingredients, damaging ingredients are, of course, preservatives, alcohols, plant extracts, essential oils. Aquaactive substances are very strong than leave out the fragrances, the alcohol, and antibacterials anyway, of course. So, now our certification. This is our seal. We have a larger seal, which has more information. Then we have a small version of it and a small round seal, which is good for packaging. It's the one that people like best and our customers prefer. We're worldwide the only people who certify the influence of cosmetics on the microbiome. We also developed a seal for probiotics in the food industry because there are many products which are not valid scientifically, but there are also a few good ones, and we would like to point out these differences using our certification. So we're watching specific microbiomes. So we're differentiating between the following body sites because they have all individual microbe compositions. So we're looking at the normal skin, body skin. We're also dividing it into dry, moist, and fatty. Then the microbiome of the scalp is very specific. The vagina, very specific. We only look at lactobacillus there. That's an example where we don't want any diversity. We want something very specific. The microbiome, the more specific it is, the better. Then we have a baby standard because they have a different composition than adults. And then mouth, foot, and nose. We have various tests which we conduct. One is the diversity test. So we have a culture from the microbes, which are specific, or which we chose for the respective body site, and can measure the interaction between those microbes and analyze it together with the product. Then vitality, this means that we plate the microbes individually and see whether they're killed or inhibited. Then we have the balance test, which includes 2 microbes with most standards. It's epidermidis and Staphylococcus aureus. With aureus, we know it's bad. And the product is supposed not to promote the growth of Staph aureus compared to Staph epidermidis. And the microbial quality is analyzed as well. It's just a contamination test, so the product should be clean and not contain any contamination because that would disrupt the test. This is an example of our customers. These are not all of them. 80% of our customers are from the US. The indie beauty market, the clean beauty market is all for the microbiome, and microbiome as such is a bit of a hotter topic in the US than it is here. But we also have great customers in Europe, Veleda, Annemarie Börlen, DSM, so we also work together with the producers of ingredients who have the ingredients in the concentration in which is going to be used in the product, and they're having that analyzed, so it's a B2B seal in that case. One product with crude, here they have a wash gel which is completely silk-free, and I've never seen that before. And I'm always happy to see that such products even exist. They're so well done. So that first of all they do what they're supposed to, but they also go easy on the microbiome. It's really, really interesting, the entire topic. And I'm a microbiologist. I don't have a lot to do with cosmetics, but I think it's super exciting to work in this field, and I always meet very interesting people. So it's a great topic, and with this I would like to thank you. I'm looking forward to taking your questions, and I also have a booth, and I'll still be here, available for questions. You find me in Hall 3 at booth D227. Thank you. Well, did I talk over you? In your one slide, you showed standards, 18 point something. What are these standards? I'm from ISO, and cosmetics. So would it make sense to expand this globally, the methods? What is it? These are methods that we developed ourselves, and the standards reflect the various microbe compositions on our various body sites, and we just called them, it's just consecutive numbers. It's just the way we call them. So, but your company is the only one. Yes. Of course, there are other labs who offer other tests, but we are the only ones who offer certification. We are also worldwide in Japan, the US, Korea, Europe. I have two questions. One is about zinc oxide. What's the problem with zinc oxide? It's absolutely antibacterial. So the antibacterial function is the problem. So that means sunscreen with zinc oxides would be a problem for the microbiome. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I was surprised myself. Well, it doesn't surprise me to hear about zinc oxide, but we tested about 16 sunscreens because we were interested to see what happened, because they contain a lot of chemicals. But I was surprised because the new modern filters, they were okay. We had one product with 6 different filters and it looked good. So Tinosorb and all these chemicals wouldn't be a problem. What about titanium dioxide? The difference is whether it's nano or not. I'm not so much pro-nano, but for microbiome, nano was okay. That's interesting, because the pigmented titanium dioxides, which are in foundations and makeup, are a shield against high-energy visible light. So that's why it's recommended for that. But now, if you look to the other... look at the other side, that it's not great for the microbiome. That's unfortunate, is it? Yeah, it's difficult. So the highly particulate titanium dioxide particles would be the problem, not so much the nanoparticles. Yes, they're free. The nanoparticles are coated, which is why they don't have a direct effect on the microbiome. But titanium dioxide as such is antibacterial. So if you didn't have it in a nano state, it would be more antibacterial. Thank you. It's really interesting. And my second question, the pH value. I mean, of course, we have a different pH on every side of the skin, but most studies, at least in dermatology papers, they give an average of 4.9 to 5.6. So average 5.5. So you can't just go and say, I do the cream for the forehead like this and for cheeks like that. And so my question is, when you have a cosmetic product which corresponds to the average pH, 5 plus minus 0.5, when you say that that is not damaging the microbiome? Do you have a recommendation? Yes. Well, it depends on the product. I also learned something completely new about ionized water today. So it depends on what happens. If you have a cream or something that actually stays on the skin, it should correspond to the pH of the skin, particularly with the vagina. So when we conduct a vagina standard, we look at the product. If the pH is more than 4.5, we say there's no need to test it even in the first place. Okay, but the vagina is something different. But let's just talk basics. The face. Hands is also a bit alkaline, but face is usually 4.5 to 5.5. What would you say for a facial product, if you want to be within that range of 5.0 in all cosmetic products, would you say that is not a negative impact on the microbiome? Well, you would still have to test the product. pH is only one part. You should certainly always keep the pH in mind. It would be optimum if it were within that region, but it's also possible that the pH is 7 and the other ingredients are so good or so mild that it still won't have a negative effect on the microbiome. Really? For a pH of 7? Yes, we tested products in that range as well. So the skin barrier, that's really bad, is it? Well, it depends on the nature of the product. If it's something that's just, a spray or something that doesn't linger on the skin very long, and it will just interact with the skin directly and the pH will change. But if it's a lotion, that should correspond to the pH of the skin, yes. Thank you. Oh, we're also not looking at the skin barrier in our tests. We only look at the microbiome. Other people look at the skin barrier. They know more about that.